All right, hello everyone, and welcome. It is Thursday, November 5th, and we are going to start out with a couple of items that we need to pick up from last Tuesday. I had a bit of technical issues last Tuesday's session, and I believe I've resolved all of those software issues, and we should be up and rolling smoothly here. So I sent out an archive from the month before, but it didn't have the this month's review of your 2D platformer composition. So now, on Thursday here, you have received your feedback and grade sheets for all of your week one assignments, your production technique, your technical assignment, and certainly your game composition. So I have a logic session here where we have three submissions from the group to take a listen to. So we are going to start out with a quick review of the week one assignments, grade sheets. We also have the revision assignment that has opened up online, and we want to take the opportunity to check that out and kind of discuss how you can get your assignments ready for the revision assignment, and just a couple of things that I want to point out when you are submitting for that. Let me get that called up here. So now on FSO, you should find an assignment like this. Your week one revision assignment, and this will give you an opportunity to take all of the grade sheets and feedback and make the changes necessary for your assignments and resubmit those. So I will get to that in just a sec, but let's actually start out here. I'm going to bring up a couple of grade sheets. These are all the grade sheets that you should have received now in your inbox. Whoops, I don't want that. So there's the grade sheet for the 2D platformer. There's the grade sheet for technical assignment. And there's the one for the production technique. So let me start out with the production technique, the technical assignment. Then I will talk a little bit about the game composition, and that will get us into talking about the review for these couple of submissions here for 2D platformer, and then we will wrap all of that info up with a discussion of how you take those changes and then submit to the revision assignment. That is certainly the things that we want to hit on before we get into the new material for this evening. So we do have a presentation on topics of getting started on a new game project. So that is kind of our the direction that we are going to be headed in this evening. So let me get back to these grade sheets that you have now received. We've done our first round of assignments, and so all of your weekly assignments are due on Sunday, and then I take Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to grade all of those and get the grade sheets back to you, so that on Thursday and Friday the revision assignment opens up, and you have that period of time to make any of the changes. So starting out with your production technique here, this assignment was dealing with different looping techniques, different files and pieces of music that needed to be set up in a couple of different formats for looping. So the couple of different columns here that you will find in the grade sheet: delivered, named, and looping. We have all of the different WAV files, and then a section for screenshots down here. So delivered, that means number one, the first component of this is, does the file exist? And that's the most, that's the main reason for this delivered column, of course, is if the files don't exist, then there's nothing to work with. But the other aspect of delivered, sometimes this box is unchecked and you know the file's there, you delivered the file, but the other aspect here was the correct audio delivered. What is the actual contents of the file? Yes, you have a file, a WAV file, and it's named, but it could be something completely different. If it's supposed to be the electronic music or the orchestral music or some of the other tracks that you edited down, then the files need to have the correct content. And this is either you accidentally had everything muted and the file is silent, or you had something soloed differently or incorrectly and another piece of audio was playing. So those are the common reasons that you're missing the check marks for that column. Named is pretty straightforward, as long as all of the file names follow exactly or directly this grade sheet or the asset list from the assignment, that is complete. And then, of course, it is a looping assignment, so the most important aspect here is, are the files looping correctly? The drone, those are the last ones that you did, and those can often cause issues. Those are one of the files that more often are missed. And that's mainly because there's some very specific or particular steps in the editing of those files. And if you just cut and edit 2 points, it's probably not going to work, and there's a very specific approach. The orchestral and the electronic waves, those loop pretty well because they're written that way, and it's really just making sure you correctly highlight the MIDI region. Then the moving to higher ground and Westar music clips, those are more direct editing, and so it all depends on where you found the beginning and end of the loop. So no gaps. Sometimes there's just silence at the end of the file, or fades or pops or clicks. That is the overview of the audio files, and of course there are the screenshots there. Those are pretty direct. It's as if making sure they exist, they're named properly, and they are of the correct material. So most people did quite well on that. Here is your technical assignment. This was taking your WAV files that you bounced for the game composition. So directly for that assignment, all of your files were at 16-bit 44.1 stereo. And so this assignment had you bouncing out the same files in multiple different formats so that they would be able to be used on a game console versus a mobile device versus a desktop computer versus whatever it was. So there are 2 very specific formats, and the focus of the assignment is the attention to detail of making sure that all the files are correctly formatted. So WAV files, 16-bit 22K stereo. Let me go ahead and bring this up. So let's say we wanted to bounce this file. And so we want to, we hit Apple Bounce or Apple B to bounce. We're going to switch this to WAV. We want a 16-bit 22K stereo file. So here we have 2 choices, split and interleaved. Most of the time what people are thinking about when they think about stereo files is an interleaved file because it is a single file with 2 channels in it. Split files would actually give you 2 files. So we're going to go for the interleaved option there. And we would hit OK and name it according to the asset list and bounce it to some location where we know where it is. And that's pretty straightforward. And most people had no issue with that, with these formats, because really it's just changing this to the correct sample rate. Now the core audio files, if anything, people missed this mono part, because getting a mono file out of Logic is not as direct as it might seem. So you want to bounce an 8-bit 22K mono file. So let's see, we're going to take this file, we're going to hit Apple B again, Command B, and we're going to make a core audio file. We're going to switch this to CAF. We're going to change the the bit depth to 8-bit, the sample rate to 22K, and then we want a mono file. So, well, our choices here are two stereo formats. We have interleaved, which is a single stereo file, or split. And we could kind of cheat, although this is not really correct, where we could take a stereo file, bounce out a split stereo file, so we have .L and .R, two mono files, and just delete one side and only have like the left side. It's not really correct because it's not entirely mono, it's just the left side of a stereo mix. Yes, it is a mono file, but you're missing half of the mix. So none of these options are correct, and in order to bounce out a mono file, there's a couple of specific steps in the workflow PDF that describes how you are going to get a mono file out of here. So we got this file, it's on a particular track here, and we are going to go out to our stereo output, and we're going to switch this to mono, because this is what we're listening to everything on. This is the main output of our session, and if we do this, you can see a couple of things happen here, where you go to mono and your meter gets a little bit skinnier, and these rings go from two interlocked rings to a single mono ring, and you lose your pan because it's a mono file or a mono output. So now we are ready to bounce. Let's try this again. We could go here and hit Apple B, and core audio files 8-bit 22K. But if we look here, we still only have the stereo formats. And this is where Logic has a bit of a difference between the main bounce window, and there's another way to bounce out this file. So this is just Apple Bounce, right? If we just went to File Bounce, oops, not the right one. File Bounce. You're only going to get a stereo output because it's bouncing from the entire session. And here, with this stereo output, once you have switched this to mono, you are actually going to use this B and C E button down here. This bounce will bounce directly from this mono channel as opposed to bouncing from the entire session. We hit this bounce button, and we can go to 22K, core audio file, 8-bit, 22K, and notice that we don't have an option for stereo or split or interleaved or anything like that. So this is how we know we are getting a mono file. We hit OK, we name it, and we bounce it to some place that we know. And then you should always go back to your files and double check them. If you look at the files, you can see the correct format or the format that the files are in. This is how I check them. I just go through the files and I look through each one of them and double check the naming and the file formats. So if you were missing this column here, number of channels, and you were missing these check marks down here, it's because you bounced out stereo files as opposed to mono. Everything else was pretty straightforward: sample rate, bit depth, whether it was WAV file or core audio file, and every once in a while file name was off. All right, so those are the overall changes for the technical assignment. And now let's talk about the game composition. Let's see here. That should work. All right, so 3 main sections. Past the delivery. Does everything exist? Was it named properly? Was it delivered properly? Are there screenshots? for the session for each of the different sections. Music intro, proper formatting, appropriate instrumentation. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to start with main loops so that we can kind of build off of that. Main loops, proper formatting, appropriate instrumentation, seamless looping, overall composition, and the overall mix, right? So is it formatted correctly? Does the instrumentation of the cue make sense? Does it loop? An overall view of your composition and an overall view of the mix. So some very basic components of everything. The overall composition is often where if there is something really obviously missing or lacking, that's a kind of a catch-all area for a lot of different approaches, where either there's not enough detail or there's repetition in the music, or there's not much of a melody line. That's typically where the composition check marks fall. Proper formatting, most people did just fine on this. This is are the files 8 bars long, and are they named properly, sample rate, bit depth, all of that. Appropriate instrumentation, does the instrumentation make sense for the context of the music in the game? And is there enough? Is there drums, bass, harmony, and melody, and instrumentation, maybe multiple layers of instrumentation to make up those different sections? Seamless looping. This is very important for the main loop because this is going to be most of what you hear through the game. This is, does the file loop? There's no pops, there's no clicks, there's no gaps. Sometimes the instrumentation just does a really hard reset where lots of sounds, lots of frequencies and bass and drums and everything just kind of turns off and starts over again. So that's quite important in the main loops. And then the overall volume mix. Mainly this is it way too loud or distorted? Or maybe you're hitting some compressor or limiter really, really hard. Sometimes it's actually very good to have a compressor and limiter on the main output or the master output to kind of control things until you just kind of slam it and everything loses all sorts of dynamics and maybe starts distorting. The other side of it is if it's way too low in volume, where you can't really hear or distinguish the different elements of it. Every once in a while, if it's like crazy panning or crazy effects or anything like that, anything really out of whack in the mix. And then the other sections kind of are based off of the same ideas: proper formatting, appropriate instrumentation. Do you have enough layers in the cues? Consistency of instrumentation. This is important for the intro and the ending cues, where whatever instrumentation is established in the main loop, you need to make sure that the intro uses those instrument layers to build into the main loop, and then the ending uses those to resolve and bring everything to a strong finish. Excuse me. What else? Build into the main loop. Is there an actual build up of the tension, the anticipation, the energy kind of rising right to the very end of the intro, right before it drops into the main loop? And then another category for overall mix. The ending is basically the same thing, but here you're really focused on resolving the main loop. Does everything end strongly? There's no real obvious level differences or instrumentation differences as you're going in or out of the main loops. And do the ending cues actually end and finish and make it to silence before the file cuts off the ending? So those are the types of things that will kind of make effects through the ending cues. So it's really about kind of this build, the sustain of the energy through the main loops and the release of everything down in the endings. So that should give you a solid idea of the kinds of things that we are looking for or we're listening for. And so let's do that now. So in the archive, you got some folks from last month, but of course, for those that submitted this round, we definitely wanted to take the chance to listen to it. And hopefully you guys will be encouraged, everybody else, to participate next week and add your files. There is a section on FSO to submit your game compositions, so we can. I know that you want to participate, and we can listen to it during class. All right, all I'm doing is separating intros, endings, and main loops. Main loop 1, 2, 3. Music ending 1, 2. Where's my main loop 1? Section 1, week 1, game composition. Oh, because there's only 2. All right. So let's talk about some of those points for overall for all 3 of these. You can notice, number 1, that all 3 of them have strong levels. There's nothing that's too low, or they still look like they have some room and dynamics, and they're not completely just 2x4 all the way across the waveform. Each one of these main loops are set up to loop, meaning that they extend all the way through the file. There's no gaps towards the end, at least not real big or visual. The intros here are also going to build up and rise all the way to right before they drop into the main loops. These 3 intros, there might be an issue. It might be just a rhythmic change, but there is a gap at the end, so we'll pay attention there. And then the 3 endings, those all need to come to a finish and an ending, right? So these all, you can tell they make it to silence. These you certainly can tell. With each one of these, the main thing is you could probably just, oops, no, where's my slice? My new computer doesn't have all my key commands. Hold on. I don't want solo. I want S for split. All right, let's try that again. Region, split. Okay, not the right key command. Key. Oh. Split at playhead. How about that? Aha! Splitting. Yeah, so you can just chop that file in half and probably get... Actually, it looks like there's some symbol tail, so it all depends on by the time the symbol is out. Or you could put a fade, but you probably don't need that extra information there. And these all look like they fall to silence, so at least visually we got some good things going here. So let's start out. Of course, we need all 3 of these, but let's check out those. Let's see. I want to be on this track, and I'm going to double check. First off, we're going to make sure that you can hear this and I can hear this, and we're all good there. That looks correct. I'll just do this. Oh, let's switch this back to stereo. Okay. Looks like you can hear that. Can you hear that? Hear the music and still hear me? And is everything working on your end and my end? Yes. Excellent. All right. Looks like we are rolling. Okay. So, main loops. We're going to start on the main loops. Give us an idea what everything's going to sound like, and then we'll go from there. All right. So, good instrumentation here. Lead melody works. Right, develops through. There's a little bit of repetition there, but they're just the phrasing. That can maybe bounce around a little bit more, but it definitely works with the progression. I like the kind of fun, light melody overall. Let's switch over to this one. All right, a little key change here. All right, key change, chord progression change. Little melody there. Oh. Sorry. Let me double check my volume here. Talking, you can't hear me as much. Hold on, let's see. All right, I'll just fade that down. Is that better? Does that sound all right? All right, very good. So here we've got the key change. We've got a little bit from the melody, maybe fill in the gaps between just the phrases there. That's a small point, but the files loop properly, they fit well, and they should transition nicely in the game. So they're set up correct, and that works. Let's try these intros here. Like I said, there's a little gap, but we'll see if those are more rhythmic. Right, so they do work, right? That gap certainly is a little pickup note before it drops in. All right, each one of them rises up a little bit, brings the energy up. All right, so if we just like randomly took one of these and dropped it here. It's not perfect like that. Yeah. The game would probably seam it together a little bit better. So those work. And then the endings here. Little sound effect in there. Cool. And they all resolve strongly. They all come back to the tonic and end. There is a little sound effect in there. Right. And I often warn against putting sound effects in your music. This one is very musical, right? It kind of helps resolve everything. So that one works just fine. You would have to watch out. People sometimes put, I don't know, applause or laughing or gunshots or like explosions or some battle sounds or whatever it is, alien sounds in the music. And you certainly have to watch out for that because the sound effects folks don't want you making sound effects just as much as you don't want them making music, or at least you don't want them to put music in their sound effects just as much as they don't want you to put sound effects in your music, because when you go to mix the game and put them all together, it becomes a little bit more confusing. So it doesn't mean that you can't make sound effects and they can't make music. It's more about the mix and the organization of everything. So, but that is more towards a percussive sort of musical effect, and that works fine. All right, so Melodically, very good. Good development through each one of the cues. They loop and fit well. So certainly a good start overall. Just a couple things that we pointed out. Let's try the next one here. We'll start out with the main loop. Alright, lost all sound. Oh, sorry about that. I thought I was just muting my microphone and I muted the other stuff too. Alright, so with this one, we got the drum pattern, the bass line, and the kind of rotating melody. The melodic line is a bit repetitive in its pattern. The follows the chord progression very closely, so it definitely should move around a bit more. Plus, the drum pattern gets a bit repetitive. It could have a bit more change overall. Let's just see if it happens here. All right, so same sort of idea. Just in the repeating phrasing, just in the repetition of the, really feels like an arpeggiated pattern. It could be move a bit more. Also, is that me? Is that the... Oh, sorry. Let's click on. Alright, so again, just move the melody around. I mean, you could just change the phrasing a bit more as opposed to just strictly following the chord changes. Everything loops well. The melody is mixed a little bit back against the drums. It could be brought a little bit forward. Let's try the intro cues. All right, let's try the next one. All right, the first and third one have a bit more rise. Maybe it's just because of the drums. All three of these intros use the same chord pattern, going from the 4 to the 5 to then drop into the 1. And the drums help. The O2 doesn't feel like it has as much of a rise. I like the it's either like a kalimba or maybe steel drums in the background, but more, like more maybe from the melody, and more build up, more of a rise. This one feels more like a 2-bar loop, right? There's a little bit of drum pattern. Oops, go away, loops. But these works a little bit better with that drum fill. Yeah. All right. A little more energy build up from those cues, and then 3 endings. Cool. And then you just get rid of all that silence. Yeah, there's way more movement and melody in the endings here. Actually, I like this one. Use that idea to develop a melody through the cue and work it through each one of them. All right, so they're formatted correctly. Levels work well, so they'll work correctly in the game. That's always a big step, and then just a bit more development and yeah, like you said, less arpeggiator and more development from the melody. All right, we'll try another one here. So let's start main loop. Cool. Melody works well. Drums are a little bit loud against the melody, right? That kick and side stick. I was gonna say maybe the melody and the bass follow a little bit too closely, but I think that was just that section. I think those are just the falls there. Maybe a bit more from the piano part. Because melody works, bass line works, drums work, but there's just like chords. So just some more harmonic instrumentation, more from the main progression. Let's do this one. Loop 2. Alright, rhythmic change. This one also follows arpeggios through the chord changes, so more like the first melody. Rhythmically it works, again, more from the harmonic instrumentation more than just the chords, although this one has at least a little bit of a groove to it. More from the chords, more from the progression, more from the melody on the second one there. And okay, I don't know if I would change the snare sound, although it works, right? You go from side stick to the snare. You have to work in the context of the game. Again, the phrasing and the melody, a bit repetitive. Second half, similar. So more movement there, more from the chords. I like the instrumentation though. It works. Works well for the vibe of the game. Intros. They actually feel more like endings because they're generally moving downwards and they resolve back to the tonic. Do, 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 boom. Which could end very well. So they need to rise up and maybe hang on a fourth or a fifth or something. Going back to the tonic just says I'm finishing a little bit more than like a little bit more than the intros need. All right, and endings. Cool, right? It works there. Maybe a little bit more variation from one to the next. You could just throw one of these in there as you're at. These have a little bit more of the instrumentation from the main loops than these do. Maybe these, I don't know. Yeah, I see. It's mostly there. All right. Cool. Gives us good things to talk about, good things to discuss. So always a good opportunity to submit your files so that we can take a listen to them. And gives me the chance to just kind of point out some overall ideas and places to go and things to avoid and those kind of things. So now that you have received all of the grades and the feedback and the grade sheets and all of the materials that you need, you can make any of the changes that are necessary and submit it for a revision submit it to the revision assignment, where I will go ahead and make another pass at it, listen to all the changes, and the revision assignments are the best way to make make the necessary changes and update the grades. The first round of grades in the month, especially the game compositions, may be less than the at the level that you might want, and so there is certainly an opportunity to do revisions, because things that really hurt the grade pretty badly are also things that can be fixed quite simply and really make big changes to the grades. So in the feedback and in the grades and all that, if I am talking more about the technical side of things, then that part is typically graded a bit harder, or it's not. Well, sometimes it does take off more points, but it also, if you do something simple but wrong on one file, you typically do it across multiple ones, and it can really quickly change the grade. So if I'm talking about what the file is named, the sample rate, the bit depth, whether or not it loops, the mix, like it's completely distorted, or I can't hear anything at all. Those are the more technical aspects that are a bit more cut and dry, and you can quickly make those changes once they're pointed out. So that's the first hurdle. If I'm more talking about the creative side of things, your choice of instrumentation, your choice of melody, or the maybe just the melody, like how is there a melody, how complex it is, your chord progression, your mix, like actual critiquing of the different details of the mix, not just too loud, too soft kind of stuff. Those are more of the creative aspects, the composition, the instrumentation, the kind of vibe and theme of the game, how appropriate things are. Those are the better topics to be talking about. That's more about the music itself. That means you've gone through and met all of the technical requirements, and now we're just getting into the music itself. So definitely take the opportunity to make the changes and do the revisions. I will point out that the revision assignment is optional, so certainly if you got 100 on the assignment, that I don't think that happens on the game composition all that much, but the technical assignment, the production technique, yeah, you could certainly knock that out the first time, and there's no reason for a change or revision. If you're perfectly happy with your grade, then you don't have to submit for the revisions. However, they are certainly highly encouraged, and like I said, the best way to make changes to your assignment and changes to the grade. So when doing the revisions, once you've completed the work and you are submitting everything, a couple of things that I ask. Number one is please submit all of the files again to create a complete project when you submit it for the revision. So don't just submit the revised files, like you only have to change the main loops, so you only deliver 3 files. No, give me the entire project again, all of the original files and the revised files. That way, when I look at it, I have a complete version of it. I don't have to go to multiple files and folders to put together a complete version. That way I don't mess anything up, and I don't have to like fumble around and screw anything up when I'm trying to listen to everything. I can just go to the revision folder, and there's everything complete again, and I can work with it there. The other aspect is do not change any of the file names to make them anything different than what the assignment is. Don't change any of the WAV file names. A lot of times people will put underscore version 2 or revision or their initials or BIP for bounce in place or whatever it is. Don't change any of the file names, especially because, again, the game is looking for a very specific file name. So don't put revision on any of the file names here. Do it to the folders, right? On your folder, go ahead, name it the exact same way from the project, but put underscore revision so that I know everything within that file is a revised version or meant for the revised version, and that won't change how the files operate in the game. You can do 1 or 2 or all 3 assignments, whatever you need, and put them in each one of their individual folders, then put them in the one overall folder, zip that up, and send that off to me. So, revision assignment closes Friday. Turn in the ones that you need and want to revise. Don't change any of the original file names. Just change the names of the folders and submit everything all together at once. All right, so that should get us all caught up to where we are for this evening's session. Like I said, there's a couple of things that we wanted to point out to make it current for this month. Certain things that the week two archive doesn't cover. Now, most of it's exactly the same. It's we also talked about your new Angry Bots composition, your chiptune game or chiptune production assignment, and the technical assignment, which is creating all of the sound effects for last week's game. So if you have any questions about any of those assignments as you are working through them this week, please let me know, send me a message. But haven't gotten anything so far, so I'm assuming that everything is working for you technically, musically, all of those aspects. So let's go ahead and get into the new material for this evening. Here in week 2, our discussion is focused more on the creative side of things, where tonight we are really going to start from what is the when you're starting with a new project, when you're starting from scratch, how do you determine what music you need and where does it go, and how much music you need, and what is the music doing in your game. So we'll talk about different concepts and ideas from the creative side of what is the purpose of the music, and what are some of the functions, and what sort of tasks does the game and the music serve, what sort of aspects are related to the gameplay. And we'll also talk about different game genres and how it correlates with different music styles and different approaches of the music, and just kind of how to break down the start of a game project to figure out exactly what is needed from the music. So let me take a quick pause here before we get into these new topics. Let me know if you have any questions. Now's a good time to post those up. Hold on. All right. So, our first topic here, some of the large global ideas of what is the function or purpose of music. What is it there to do, and what purpose does it serve? And so, music in a video game has a lot of the same purpose that it does in other mediums and formats, whether it is for the stage or for the movie screen. Game music for games is often there to tell the player how to feel, where the dialogue tells the story, and sound effects are often more of the facts and information of what's going on in the game. The music is there to tell the player how to feel about it, and it's there to pull your emotional heartstrings in all sorts of different directions and follow the ups and downs of the storyline. And so it is there to punctuate and emphasize different story plot points and twists, and one of your main jobs as the music composer is to be able. It's certainly one aspect to compose one piece of music for one part of the game, but it's another skill set entirely to tie that music soundtrack together over the full course of the game, where you have the highest and loudest part of your game and the lowest and quietest, and how you balance that over the entire hours of gameplay. And it's certainly a challenge, and there are similar challenges in a movie. And so it is determining different musical aspects of how the game and story and music are all going to work together. So there's a couple of other musical concepts for how your music is going to work in the game. And so certainly the emotional qualities is one of the ideas at the forefront, one of the more common ideas, and one of the more direct, one of the more direct and obvious is the emotional aspect. But when you are either starting out or sometimes stuck in a particular, maybe with writer's block, there are certain, there's a checklist that you keep in your brain of different ideas and concepts and approaches that you can run through those different ideas to make sure you have addressed all of the different options that might be part of your music in the game. So these are different functions of what music can do for your game. The next one here is music as a state of mind. Games are very good at kind of separating you from your surroundings and getting you in the zone, as it were, where you are more and more focused on and kind of sucked into the game world. Music does this very well through repetition. This is very common in electronic music, where you are through the use of repetition and building and changing the rhythm and the music as a whole. You can kind of put people into a particular mind state and kind of get them zoned in and locked into the game, and kind of bridge that gap into the game world. So music can often provide the energy that is needed in the game. It can kind of bring you up and down to reflect the action that's going in on the screen. Music as a world builder. This is putting you in the world and in the environment. So once you've gotten in the zone, it's keeping you there and keeping you in that world. This is a fun demo. This little movie here is from a recent Microsoft demo of their new device, which is what he's wearing on his face. It's called HoloLens. This is kind of in line with, I don't know if you've heard of Oculus Rift, which is kind of popular. It's the virtual reality devices, VR devices, augmented reality. This is not VR, it's actually augmented reality. It's projecting things over real world surfaces. And he's playing Minecraft here, but it actually builds it into the real world, at least through what you're seeing there. And so all of these new technologies are also going to need music and sound in them, and it is really about immersing the player in the game world. So music can very, very quickly tell the player where they are and when they are in history, where they are in the world or the universe, and give them a sense of their surroundings, the culture, the time period, very, very quickly with the music. With your choice of instrumentation, your genre, style will very, very quickly tell the player whether they are in the past or in the future or whatever, and try to keep them there as best as they can. Music as pace setter. This is a very common approach for your music. This also goes along with the rise and fall of the energy in the game. We have music can determine the pace or the tempo that the game is kind of set at. If you need to feel like you're going fast, then the music can really serve that feeling. A lot of times the music is telling the player to hurry up. Super Mario Brothers is a classic example of this, where I think if it got below 200 seconds left in the game level before time ran out, the music would speed up. It'd kind of go to double time to make the player give a sense of urgency and want to be going as fast as possible. So racing games do this really well. Music and singing and dancing games do this. Puzzle games do this quite often. And very, very rarely does the game actually speed up and slow down your music. What you're doing is typically from the composition point, in that context, you are either directly changing the tempo or just using different subdivisions of the beat or different resolutions. You'll go to halftime or cut time or double time or whatever it is to give the not necessarily the tempo, but just the pacing, bring the pacing up and down in the music. Music as an audience. Often music is there reacting to the player and their actions. If the player is doing good, you hear some good, positive music, some musical flourishes that rise and congratulate you. And if you're doing bad, then maybe you get the Price is Right horn, or they can't steal that directly, but the same sort of idea. The wah-wah kind of bone-wah feel, or you can, sometimes the music will almost tease or taunt the player. I always think of the when playing Duck Hunt on the original Nintendo and that dog popping up and the music going along with it, or dun 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 bomb. That sort of small musical theme reacts whenever Mario loses life, and it reacts very, very directly. So if you get a high score, then if you maybe get a power up, you'll get these little musical flourishes that give you and tell the player hopefully very obviously that they've done something right or wrong. So Often this is a stinger or an embellishment or a little kind of one shot off sound. Very rare. I don't want to say very rarely. There's probably a lot of instances of it, but the music itself may not change directly. There's often a layer on top that gives this sort of effect. Music as branding. I love this little animation up here because it probably you could think of the music and sound effects very quickly just by viewing the games. Music as branding is where the music becomes so obvious and so memorable and so very well connected to the game that it becomes sort of a has the fingerprint of the game. It has the connection and the memory of the game, and it is very quickly and directly identifiable, even separate from the game. Right. So a lot of these classic. I always think that there are classic melodies roaming around in my head from all of these classic Nintendo games. I have a lot more important information over my lifetime that I should have actually remembered, but these melodies can be etched into my brain forever. Some of it was because I was young and impressionable when playing all of these games. Some of it was so repetitive and I was playing it over and over and over again, and so it just becomes directly etched into your brain. And it is a combination of memorable, catchy, repetition, attention-grabbing kind of pieces of music. It's a balance in a game. Sometimes you want the music to just be in the background and not be memorable or identifiable at all. It's just kind of musical wallpaper. Other times it needs to be very direct and very obvious and very well connected to the game. So sometimes this happens just by chance or just because it's so well connected. Like a more modern example I certainly think of is the Angry Birds theme. Angry Birds is for a while now has been just everywhere and on all sorts of different devices, and you hear it over and over again as you load up and play the game. And everybody in the world has played the game at different times, maybe, and so it was a very small game, and the composer connected to it was certainly working on smaller games, but the game absolutely blows up, and it becomes etched into the kind of popular consciousness of everybody as the audience. The next one here, music as demarcation. Demarcation is locations in the game, different parts of the game, and using music to give you a sense of place and location in the game. One of these concepts or an aspect of this is the idea of diegetic and non-diegetic music. This is a concept that is taken from film and television, where music is either for the purpose of the listener or the viewer, or it actually exists in the game world or the TV world or the film world. Most music in film or television, and certainly a game, is non-diegetic. It's only there for the viewer. It really goes to the emotional aspect, telling the player how to feel about all of the actions on screen. Diegetic music is music that actually exists in the game world. It exists for the purposes of the characters in the story. It is a radio, a car radio, those are the most common ones, or something that they are interacting with directly, that they hear it. And so this is a common theme and approach used in different games of where does the music exist. The other aspect of that is as you move into different parts of the game, different screens, different locations, different levels, different puzzles, you might hear different music that you only hear in that section. And so that music marks that location in the game and is very directly connected to it. It was a little bit more popular when games were not so open and continuous, where they had to be based off of levels or screens, or like there were a genre called point and click adventures where they were just a screen and you clicked around and you interacted with there, and then you walked off the edge of the screen and it moved off to the next part of the game. So and different parts of the music would be for interiors and exteriors. And so music, another aspect here is to create immersion. It is kind of goes along with the idea of a state of mind where you are drawn into the game world, and it is the sense that you are directly connected and completely engrossed in the game. It's this idea of suspension of disbelief. This is a common theory or thought in storytelling, where you can it doesn't matter what could be or real or realistic. Your mind is convinced that man, this is as real as it's getting right now. So it is to put you in that world. This is kind of the idea of it's past midnight and everybody in your house is asleep, you think, and all the lights are off, and you're playing some horror game, and you're totally zoned in on the game, and maybe you're playing with your headphones on or something, and somebody walks into the room and flips the lights on, you freak out and throw the controller across the room, which may or may not have happened to me before, but it's that lock and that zone that you get in locked into the game, where you don't want to do anything with the music to throw players out of that sense of immersion. You do that often. One of the worst ways to do that, or one of the easiest ways to kind of throw them out of the game, is with repetition. Repetition in melody or instrumentation or sound effects, or anything where the player all of a sudden goes, yeah, that's a computer. That's not actually in a real world or situation. You can very quickly kind of, oh, this is a game. It's broken, or it's doesn't react how I would think it would in the actual real world, and you kind of lose that sense. So the music is there. Music does very well to create the sense of immersion. It's a little more difficult to break the sense of immersion. Sound effects do that very easily, right? With bad dialogue or bad sound effects, you can quickly break a sense of immersion in a game. All right, so those are just some underlying concepts of what the music can be doing for your game, so that when you're hitting roadblocks or coming up with ideas, you can kind of make sure that all of the different approaches are addressed. So the next topic I want to get into here is game music themes, different thematic ideas for how you can attach music to basically common ideas in games. This is musical themes are a very common approach to soundtrack for a film or a television series. A lot of these ideas have their roots in other medias and other formats, and are just using very common approaches and are just applying them to games. And there's certain aspects that are unique for games, but certain that are very, very common. A main theme. This is the main theme is often what is most closely associated with the game, the piece of music that is most directly associated with the game. For Super Mario Brothers, always going back to that example, it's da 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 da, and on and on. So that's, you hear it over and over again. It's where it starts out in the game, and it becomes the main piece of music that people associate with that game. You don't really sit down to write the main theme when you're writing the soundtrack. I mean, sometimes that happens, but more often than not, a main theme kind of shows itself over time, where you typically in the beginning, towards the beginning of a project, you are just really writing music for the sake of writing music to come up with all of the ideas, all of the different textures, all of the different instrumentation that you're going to use, and you write for all of the different large ideas and concepts in the game. Like, my game has levels in it, so I'm going to write, I have 15 levels, so I know I'm going to need 15 pieces of music for each one of those different parts of the game. And I know I have different locations or characters or different story plot points of good things happening and bad things happening. And so I typically start out writing in just emotional concepts like, oh, this is for generally for winning music, and this is generally for losing music, and this is I'm in danger, or I'm successful, and so you just start writing to get a sense of style and genre and instrumentation, and you build up a library of different thematic ideas that you can start plugging in holes. So you don't you don't sit down and write music in any sort of linear way for a game. You don't say, okay, today's the first day I'm writing music for this game. I'm going to write it for level 1, and tomorrow I'm going to write music for level 2, and then I'm going to write music for level 3, all the way till the end of the game. You generally write music for large ideas in the game, and then you start figuring out where things go. And over time, there is a piece of music that becomes very thematic, very well, it's often very much liked by everybody on the project, where everybody says, wow, that's a piece of music that we can hang this entire game project on. And it often uses what are known as musical constants. These are an aspect of your soundtrack or your instrumentation or your composition that you can reflect on and utilize in different shapes and forms all throughout your soundtrack. So different melodic ideas, different choices of instrumentations or rhythms that you can use over and over again in slightly different contexts. So the main theme often is found in the main menu. It often just becomes the first piece of music that you hear over and over again. Every time you load up that game can often become the main melody, the main theme, whether that's intentional or not. Leitmotif, very common approach in all sorts of media, whether it's film or television or stage or all sorts of different musical formats. This is a melodic theme that is associated basically with a person, place, or thing. Some common idea that happens throughout the game, whether it's just an idea or whether it's a physical object in the game. Granted, it's a game, it's a computer, nothing's physical, but if it's an object or a location or a player or a character, of course Darth Vader would be the classic example of that in film and television and games, where every time he shows up, there's the Imperial March plays, and you know something bad's about to happen. So character themes are very, very common form of this, form of leitmotif, where games do this very well with good guys and bad guys, right? If you're in the town and you're safe and you walk into a shop, you meet the shopkeeper, typically there's some light and easy and friendly music playing in the background. If Darth Vader walks into that shop, then the Imperial March plays and you know something bad's about to happen. Or they'll twist it on you. Oh, this character's good until they're not. And then all of a sudden the music changes to a darker tone and you realize that you just got fooled, or they were all actually evil the entire time. So character themes are very common. If you encounter a particular character over and over again, you will hear their character theme. Level themes are also very, very common in games. Levels are more modern games have kind of pushed away from the level model, or the level approach, right? Levels were typically a reality of earlier games where they couldn't effectively load up the entire game as it was being played. So they just load up chunks at a time, and level 1, level 2, and level 3, and you progress through those levels. As one level was finished, the next level was loading up. It unloaded all of the old graphics and sounds and music from the old level and loaded up all the new stuff. So level themes, level music was very, very common, where you only heard that music in that level, and it could almost be a character theme too, where if you only found that character in that level, right? Mortal Kombat was a great example of this. In certain modes, you were only fighting that character in their level, and so you heard that particular level theme. Going back to Super Mario Brothers, always a classic example of this. You are above ground, and you hear the main Super Mario Brothers theme. And then you went into one of the green pipes, and you go underground, and you hear an underground theme. Later on, you go into the water levels, and you hear a water theme. And every time you're in that element, you are going to hear those particular pieces of music. All the way from the original Super Mario Brothers, even up till the modern ones. They do the same sort of ideas. They have very common themes through each one of the games. Excuse me. ID Fix. This is a concept that is discussed in the textbook as sort of a extension of leitmotif, where the motif is typically more common with the noun side of things, the person, place, or thing, where it's an actual object in a game. The fixed idea or fixation, ID fix, is the relentless thematic melodies that are attached to more of the concepts or idea side of things. One of the classic examples of this from literature is Edgar Allan Poe's Telltale Heart, where the murderer buries the victim under the floorboards and consistently hears the heartbeat in their brain and thinks that it drives them mad and insane. And so it is a thematic idea that is heard over and over again, whether it is truth or freedom or the right or wrong, or whether it's horror always sounds funny, horror, or whether it is success or winning or losing, different thematic ideas that you can impress and use over and over again. This goes to the idea of when you write a melody or a theme, you should be able to utilize it in all sorts of different ways, in a positive or negative connotation, high pace, low pace, fast or slow, and be able to twist and turn it in all sorts of different ways. If you can only think that a melody works in one format with one instrument in one particular phrase, then it's not going to be very useful if you can't twist and turn and manipulate it in all sorts of different ways for all sorts of different parts of the game. All right, so we had the functions of game music and different game music themes are kind of towards that idea of the checklist in your brain of different concepts and ideas that you should be hitting on to make sure that you can fully flesh out the soundtrack of the game. Our next topic here, game states, are more of how the music connects directly to the game. Really still haven't reached the technical side of this. This is still more in the creative, conceptual stage. But game states allow us to set up changes and transitions in the game that will change our music. How do we go from intros to main loops to endings? Or how do we go from ambient music cues to action cues? Well, we know we can write the different music, right? We can go to the in the DAW and just listen to the different chunks. But how does the game know when to change the music and put it all together? And this is really the idea of game states. It is the thing inside of the game that we hook our music to, so that when something in the game changes, the correct piece of music is associated with that change and the correct piece of music plays. So to give a definition here, I'm going to give a very poor English... let's put it this way. My English teacher would be very upset with this definition, because I was always taught that you do not use the words that you're trying to define in the definition. And so I'm going to break all sorts of those rules and say a game state is the state the game is in at any one time. And then quickly define what that means a little bit further. So a game state is any moment in time, what is happening at that moment. A game state is not a physical thing. It's more of an idea or a concept. It is the idea of action and ambient. And then how do we define what that means? So when we talked about our Angry Bots composition, we said if you are battling one of the robots, you hear a action piece of music. And if you're not battling one of the robots, then you hear ambient music. Well, when the game starts, it starts out in the ambient game state because you're not fighting any robots at that point. And the game knows, right? The game is the software. It is the computer. So it knows everything that's happening in every millisecond, every moment in time. And when anything changes, then our music can change to that. All we need to think about is the ideas or the concepts that we're going to use to change the music. So a game state isn't any like one object or thing. It's just the changes that happen in the game at any time. So if you were to freeze the game at any moment, a game state is the score and the time left in the game and how many enemies there are and how much health points you have left and how close are you or far are you to the finish line or whatever it is. It can be absolutely anything. And that's what leaves room for the most creativity. It also, the way it typically starts out is like this in a meeting. You as the game composer say, wouldn't it be really cool if when you get to this checkpoint in the game, the music is going to switch and the drum beat's going to drop in. And then if you do this action or this trick, or if you get this power up, then the music is going to switch in this way. And then if you solve the puzzle, it's going to switch back over this way. And you as the music composer, you just know how to make music. So you'd say, wouldn't it be really cool if that happened? And the programmers and the game developers go, yeah, I guess that would work. And so they go into the game, and they let's say it's winning and losing in the game. You as the music composer have to know is at some point I can win the game, and at some point I can lose the game. So I'm going to write a piece of music called winmusic.wave, and I'm going to write another piece of music called losemusic.wave. You don't have to know anything about the code. You don't have to know anything about how it's set up in the game. All you know is there's win music and there's lose music. The programmers on their side, they don't have to know anything about the music or the instrumentation or the composition or the orchestration. They don't understand any of that stuff, just as much as you don't understand any of the code. So all they have to know is they go into the code and set it up so that if you win, then play music, winmusic.wave. And if you lose, whatever that means, play losemusic.wave. A very common concept in software and code and all that, just computers in general, is the idea of if-then, right? That's the very basics of computer science is if this is happening, then do this, right? And that happens all the time in games, right? If I get the high score, then play high score music. If I win the game, then play winmusic.wave. So they don't have to know anything about the music. You don't have to know anything about the code, but that is a game state. If I am winning, however you define winning, then attach or hook to that winmusic.wave. So when I win, play that file. That is what a game state is. We have game states like intros, main loops, and endings, right? The game knows the game state. When the game starts, then play intro music. After intro music, then play main loops and just randomly fire those off whenever you reach the end of 8 bars. Then there's a game state when the player loses all their health or falls off the level. Then it knows to switch over. However, that's in the code. We don't have to know anything about that. We don't we can kind of guess that somewhere in the code that if you fall off the edge, then it knows that you died and you lost a life, and here, play the ending music. So that is a game state, is attaching a piece of music to a change in the game. Score, health, time, those are very, very common concepts in or game states in games, right? Game states are not just for music. They're for every aspect of the game. Graphics and networking and gameplay and music and sound effects all use game states. Whenever this thing happens, if this happens, then do this. So when I say intro, main loop, and ending, separate from the actual wave files that I'm talking about, the cue file, like the cues, those are game states. Those are the concepts of how the music is actually working in the game. Same thing goes with ambience and action, and each game is unique. Every game has different game states. There's certain concepts that are common, but also others that are last topic. And others that are common across lots of different games, and tons that are unique to every particular game. All right, so that topic of game states is just a little bit more terminology, really, than anything to introduce the idea, because I use it all the way through the rest of the month. It is the thing inside the game that actually we hook our music to switch and change it over the game over time. All right, so our last topic here is game genres. And a conversation of game music would not be complete without a relation or discussion of how it relates to game genres. It's kind of like movie genres. If I'm the composer on a film and it's a comedic romp versus romantic drama versus a horror thriller movie versus a futuristic versus a period piece versus, I don't know, whatever, there are certain what's the word I'm looking for? Historic preconceptions. That's more the word I'm looking for. Certain preconceived notions that people have and expectations that people have of what the music might sound like. You're not going to get into a big romantic love scene and then drop the beat on them and freak them out, or drop some horror music, or drop the fastest, loudest, heaviest thrash metal ever. There's certain thematic ideas that relate to different movies, and just the same with games. So when somebody hires you for a first-person shooter versus a puzzle game versus a kids game versus a horror game versus a action game versus a sports game, you have a general idea of what they're talking about and the music that relates to it. So we're going to start out here with arcade games. They used to be that the only way that you were playing video games was to go to your local mall or movie theater or pizza joint and bring a whole bag full of quarters and play video games in the arcade. And arcade machines were loud and attention grabbing, and every time you threw in quarters, you typically got like 3 lives, and you started at level 1, and you started hearing the same music from the beginning. The technology was pretty limited, so it was limited sounds and limited space and length of music, so it was very short and repetitive, but you had such restrictions and limitations that they really focused on making it very memorable, very catchy, very attention grabbing, so that even in a room full of these loud machines, there's that one machine that you wanted to play. So certainly home consoles, gaming consoles came along, Atari, Nintendo, Sega, and definitely changed the gaming landscape. People didn't play video games only in the arcades anymore. Arcades have certainly changed, if not gone away. And now arcade games have a resurgence in a new format. Now people are playing all sorts of these. Arcade games are typically smaller games. They're maybe like faster games where all you have to do is go in, play it for a little bit, and get out, right? It doesn't take a lot of thought. No, I don't want to say thought. It doesn't take a lot of, I don't want to say effort either. What's the word? Constant attention. Sometimes you do. People play these games for a long amount of time, but there's not a lot of effort and consistency that you need to just put in hours and hours into these games if you don't need to. A lot of times people play arcade games, they get into the game, they're waiting in line and waiting their turn, and they just play games for a little while. So musically, it still means short and catchy, memorable pieces of music. These games are a great place to start out as a newer composer because they are typically being made by smaller, newer game companies. Everybody's kind of figuring out what they're doing, and they still have the ability to absolutely blow up and become extremely popular. Right? Nowadays, we've got things like Angry Birds and Plants vs. Zombies and all of the Farmvilles and Cityvilles. I don't know if people still play those anymore. Words with Friends. And so people have mobile devices, smartphones, tablets, all sorts of new ways. There are freemium games, downloadable games. There are games that are 99 cents, games that have microtransactions in them where, oh, the game's free, but if you want to actually get to the next level, you have to pay $1 or whatever it is. Different ways that people are drawn in and playing games. On the other kind of size and scale of the in the game industry are action games. These are not your smaller, newer developers. These are the big, well-established game companies that have millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars backing these big projects. They are typically on the scale of major blockbuster movies, typically have budgets that are even bigger than that. It seems like every year there's a Call of Duty game that breaks $1 billion in sales. The most recent big numbers out there, there's a game called Destiny that was $500 million to make, something like $200 million to actually make the game, and $300 million to market and sell it. I think they gave a couple of $1 million to Paul McCartney to write some of the theme music for it. But just absolutely massive budgets, big games, big action, and they're typically looking for big name talent and well-established, often film composers moving over into this industry. This is not necessarily the place that you're going to get started, at least in the main composer role. Certainly in the junior position or assistant composer. We've got folks working on the Borderlands series, the Call of Duty series, the Halo series, all sorts of different aspects of those games. So a lot of these games come in flavors of single player or multiplayer games. Single player it's you as the main character, you are the hero of the story, and it's more like an interactive movie that you're playing through. Multiplayer games are human versus human competitors playing online, playing networked games, and calling each other all sorts of nasty names over the internet. And multiplayer games and single player games have a very, very different approach with the music. Single player games, like movies, have a very specific soundtrack that unfolds through the game. Multiplayer games often don't have a lot of music. There's not a lot of music typically playing during gameplay because people can be quite competitive and don't want anything except the actual gameplay sounds. I say that, and then one of the most recent popular games, Star Wars Battlefront, has just come out, and it's got awesome John Williams music all the way through it because it's awesome John Williams music. So why turn it off? Adventure games, typically on the same size and scale and budgets of action games. One big difference to point out here between action games and adventure games. Action games are typically much more of a linear story-driven experience, where certainly multiplayer is a different aspect than that because it's more competitive playing against other people online. But a single-player game is a story-driven game, and often you're kind of like a rat in a maze where they put you at the beginning of the level and you have to fight your way through that level. You get to the end of the level, tells you more story, and then you move down through the game. So even though it's a big, on an epic scale, the approach to the music is a lot more linear, right? You do this thing, you hear this music, you move on to this next part of the game, and you hear that music. that is a little bit, it's a much more linear experience. An adventure game often has this more of an open world kind of feel. Adventure games certainly have their history in the fantasy kind of storytelling realm. Has its roots way back to like Dungeons and Dragons, but more in modern games like Legend of Zelda or World of Warcraft. Nowadays, you have things like Dragon's Age, The Witcher, the Elder Scrolls series with Skyrim. So there are certainly a lot of these adventure games that are in the fantasy world with wizards and kings and queens and dragons and that time period and storyline. But there's also Rockstar Games is very, very good. They do Grand Theft Auto. Certainly a different genre, but still an open world kind of experience where a lot of people don't play Grand Theft Auto to actually continue through the story. They go into Grand Theft Auto to cause all sorts of havoc and do all sorts of weird and strange things, and have a whole bunch of fun doing it. And you have, in these types of games, you are kind of put in the middle of a game world, and you go through the story in any sort of way, in any sort of progression that you feel like. There's some limitations, but it's not so much of a linear storyline. So it's a much more difficult approach for creating the music because you don't know exactly what the player's going to do. They don't have to go to point A to point B to point C. There's points A to Z, and they're going to go A to G to Q, back to L, back to Y, or whatever it is, and just jump around. And so these games are, if you don't know when the player is going to do anything, you don't know how long it's going to take them to solve that puzzle, you don't know how long it's going to take them to defeat that enemy or monster. So if you don't know when anything is going to happen, what you can use very reliably in these games is where the player is. The location of the player can often drive what they hear and the music that they experience. So if they're in the safe town versus in the dangerous cave, in whatever experience, if they are not only their location, but another aspect of that is proximity. So if they're close to danger or they're close to an enemy, then the music might start to switch and change. So you use whatever concepts that you have available to you, whether it's time, whether it's location or placement or proximity, whether it is the story plot points changing. There's just all sorts of different things that you can use to address and change the game. Sometimes these are known more as hardcore games. Compare that against casual games. Casual games are more arcade games, often more mobile devices. It's not always true, but hardcore games typically require a lot more dedicated hours of playing. These games can easily be tens, if not hundreds of hours. People have gotten lost into World of Warcraft for over a decade now. It's just, these are massive games that have tons and tons of content and require a lot of dedicated time to get through. And our last genre here are sports games, which have their own unique musical approach. Sports games can be more traditional sports, football, soccer, baseball, golf, basketball, more extreme sports, also racing, skateboarding, snowboarding. I would also throw, maybe even make this more generic and say experience games. Things like anything that's trying to mimic a realistic experience. Whether it's a sport, but you could also throw singing games and dancing games into here, where you are trying to mimic a realistic experience. So you are hearing music that you would hear in the sports stadium or in the arena. And these types of games very rarely use composed music, proprietary music. These games are typically using music from popular current recording artists, using popular licensed music, so that they are, again, mimicking the experience that you would hear on the field or in the arena or wherever you were. So this is a great way for up-and-coming artists to get exposure to a new audience, right? If you have the opportunity, if you are the artist or you are the producer or you are the record label and you're trying to look for new avenues for your music, sports games can often be just that. It is typically one of those don't call us, we'll call you kind of things, where they certainly get submissions all the time, but often maybe for legal reasons they can't review all of them. But what they'll do is sports games have an annual release date, right? They are released with the sports season. Football season is starting, or baseball season or basketball season starts up. They need to have the newest, latest version of that game ready to go. So, every single year you're going to need to make a new version of that game. And so 6 months out, 9 months out, they're scanning Billboard charts or online charts, SoundCloud, Beatport, or all sorts of different locations, and finding new talent in that genre that they're looking for. So this is a great opportunity for artists to get their music in the game. And so it's typically they're looking for newer artists, but they already have an established audience and have a track record to base the work off of. All right, so different game genres have different requirements for their music, different preconceived ideas of what the music might sound like, different sort of historic correlations to older and previous projects that you can rely on. So, these types of ideas will give you ways that you can find new content for your game, new ideas for your music. How do you what is the purpose of the music? What is it accomplishing? What are different thematic ideas that relate to different characters and concepts in the game, and how those all tie together with the genre of game that they're attached to. All right, so that's certainly enough from me for this evening. Thanks for sticking it out. I will stick around for a few minutes if you have any questions. And I think I can say it now, where it does look like we successfully made it through a session without crashing. So I think I am squared away with all of the technology, getting all of the software up and running and balanced on a new operating system. I blame El Capitan for some of the things, but I end up finding versions of things that work, so that's fine. But I think we are squared away there. So, let me know if you have any questions, but we'll wrap it up there. Your revisions are due tomorrow night, Friday, and week 2 assignments are due on Sunday, and we will meet again on Tuesday. All right? Have a good weekend, and I will see you again on Tuesday. Thanks.